Hello, I would like to read to you The Biggest and Best Flag That Ever Flew by Rebecca C. Jones. Where could it take place? Caroline Pickersgill lived with her mother and her grandmother in a small house on Albemarle Street in Baltimore. Caroline's father had died, and her mother worked at home making flags, bright, colorful flags for the ships that sailed into Baltimore Harbor. Mrs. Pickergill made many different kinds of flags for ships from all over the world, but the flags that Caroline liked the best were the flags that flew over the American ships. They had 15 stars and 15 stripes, the same as the first 15 states in the United States of America. Sometimes Caroline went into the harbor with her mother. She liked to see all of the flags and banners waving in the breeze, but she worried when she heard people talk about the war with Great Britain. They said the British troops wanted to destroy Baltimore. They wanted to burn everything, even the little house on Albemarle Street. Don't worry, Caroline's mother said on the way home. The British won't burn Baltimore. The soldiers at Fort McHenry will protect us. Caroline knew the soldiers at Fort McHenry had many guns and big cannons to protect the people of Baltimore. So she tried not to worry, even when she heard people say that the British had even more guns and even bigger cannons. One day, some soldiers from Fort McHenry came to Caroline's house to talk to her mother. They wanted Mrs. Pickergill to sew the biggest and best flag she had ever sewn. They wanted it to be the biggest flag in the whole world, big enough so everyone could see it from far away and know that Baltimore was safe. The soldiers needed the flag right away, so Caroline and her mother started working at once. They worked upstairs in Mrs. Pickergill's bedroom, cutting and sewing until after midnight every night. They made each red and white stripe as wide as the widest cloth they could find. They wanted the stars even wider, so Mrs. Pickergill, she had to weave them herself. They didn't have enough room in their little house to put the big flag together, so Caroline and her mother carried the stars and stripes to a big building down the street. They spread the pieces out on the floor, and they sewed the huge red and white stripes together. Then they laid out the wide white stars on the dark blue background and sewed them into place. Finally, the flag was finished. It was 30 feet wide and 42 feet long, and it weighed 200 pounds. 200 pounds. Nobody had ever seen such a beautiful and big flag. When the soldiers saw the flag, they were very pleased. No one will have trouble seeing this flag, they said, and everyone will know Baltimore is safe. The soldiers took the flag to Fort McHenry and raised it up a big pole there. 3 miles away, from an upstairs window in their house, Caroline and her mother could see the flag. They were sure it was the biggest and best flag in the world. See, Mama? It's right there. Everybody kept talking about the war. The British had just captured Washington, the capital of the country, only 30 miles from Baltimore. They had burned the Capitol building and the White House, where the president lived. Everybody said they would attack Baltimore next. And they did. On a rainy September morning, British ships fired on Fort McHenry. The soldiers at the fort fired back. Caroline and her mother hurried to the attic window to watch the battle. They looked for their flag, but they couldn't see anything in the rain and the mist. They could only hear the thunder of the guns and the cannons. Some of their neighbors began packing their belongings so they could leave Baltimore before the British burned it. But Caroline and her mother stayed in their house on Albemarle Street, and the battle continued through the night. In the morning, they hurried back to the window to see if their big flag was flying. It was. The British had given up, and Baltimore was safe. That afternoon, Caroline heard about a young American lawyer named Francis Scott Key, who had been on a ship in the harbor during the battle. He too had watched for the flag, and he had written a poem about it. Oh, say, can you see, by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars, through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare and the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Or the land of the free and the home of the brave? Today, that poem is our national anthem, and we sing it at ball games, special ceremonies, and public events, whenever we want to honor the American flag. And the huge flag, the one that was too big for Caroline Pickersgill House on Albemarle Street, is now the biggest and maybe the best flag exhibit at the Smithsonian Institute's National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. Thanks.